Welcome back. Another fun topic today, a brand new topic for this channel, and one that was suggested by one of my most loyal viewers and supporters. He goes by Not a Cynic. Thanks so much, as always. And don't forget, any of you out there who have a subject you want to see me cover, go to mjerant.com, send me an email, tell me what the topic is. We can discuss it, work out a very reasonable payment, and I'll do a video for you. When we hear a guitar solo in a Stones tune, we assume, yeah, that's probably Ron Wood, maybe Keith. When we hear an Aerosmith solo, got to be Joe Perry or Brad Whitford, right? Well, not necessarily. Today I'm going to cover songs that feature guitar solos played by, shall we say, special guest guitarists who are not necessarily people you would expect. Let's do it. I suspect that of the guest solos I'm going to cover in this video, this is by far the most widely known. I'm sure many of you already knew that it was Clapton doing the lead on this, but I want to get a bit more in depth, talk about why it happened, how it happened. I've known for years that this was Clapton, but I learned a few things myself in doing my research. First of all, recruiting Clapton was entirely George Harrison's idea. The two were good friends. While My Guitar Gently Weeps is a Harrison composition, and so sadly, as was often the case, he was having a hard time getting the other Beatles interested in it. It's really hard to believe. In retrospect, this may be the most remembered track from the White Album, but at that point, the dynamic within the band was still that George was the second-tier songwriter, overshadowed by Lennon and McCartney. So by bringing in a famous outsider, a virtuoso player, the whole dynamic was changed. It's really interesting. It's a study in group dynamics. The Beatles were such a tight, insular unit, and when that outsider is brought in, all of a sudden everybody has to be on their best behavior and start paying attention. And it really worked beautifully for George. So effective, in fact, that he would employ the same move again. What was it? Maybe about a year down the road. It was George Harrison's idea to recruit Billy Preston to play keyboards during the Get Back sessions. And anyone who has seen that great mammoth Peter Jackson documentary on those sessions knows exactly how the entire mood of the band changed. The group was energized by the injection of the talented outsider. But pulling the thing off required some coercion from Harrison. When he first approached Clapton with the idea, Clapton flatly refused, saying that outsiders don't play on Beatle records. And he was correct. Up to that point, nothing like this had ever happened. Now, of course, the Beatles had recruited plenty of musicians to play on their songs, but classical musicians, the string quartet on Yesterday, David Mason, who played the piccolo trumpet solo on Penny Lane. But this was something else altogether. Clapton finally relented only on the condition that his signature blues rock sound be somewhat masked to become a better fit for a Beatles album. And you know, I think that says a lot about Clapton. He could have strutted in there like a big-time gunslinger, which he really was, and tried to Claptonize the tune. But no, he behaved much more like a typical studio musician, and his main concern was enhancing the song in a more Beatle-y way, you might say. To that end, I think Clapton consciously altered his playing style here. This solo has a much more measured feel to me than other things he was doing around this time. A bit more like something George Harrison would do in some ways. But most important, I think, was the effect that was used on Clapton's guitar. They utilized something called ADT, short for automatic double tracking, which was an effect that had been invented by Abbey Road engineer Ken Townsend. And the inspiration was constant complaining from John Lennon, who was notoriously impatient in the recording studio. He hated going back and double tracking his vocals as much as he liked the effect that it produced. So Townsend's ADT made use of a tape delay and low frequency oscillator to produce a doubled, thickened, chorused effect on the instrument or voice in question, without the performer having to physically go back and do it again. So right away, this was a very Beatley sound, and it also helped produce that wobbly effect that we hear on Clapton's guitar, which gives the effect of the guitar actually weeping, an effect which is greatly enhanced by the long, soulful bends and controlled vibrato that Clapton employs. It's funny, as a guitar teacher, I found one of the hardest things for beginning blues or rock guitar players to do is to bend a string, hold the pitch, but yet give it a nice vibrato without completely losing the note. It tends to sound like someone falling off a cliff when people don't know how to do it. But here, Clapton actually uses that in a controlled way. Again, it sounds like weeping. As mentioned, I think it's pretty much common knowledge in classic rock circles that Eric Clapton played the lead guitar on While My Guitar Gently Weeps. But if you mention that those killer guitar solos in the Aerosmith version of Train Kept A-Rollin' were not played by Joe Perry or Brad Whitford, I think that would come as a surprise to most. Not only that, this was not a case of the band inviting in an outside player of their own volition. This decision was made by Aerosmith's producer, Jack Douglas, and in fact, Perry and Whitford were quite angered and hurt over the prospect of being replaced on their own album. The album in question was Get Your Wings, only the second Aerosmith album, and I suppose at this early stage of their career, they simply didn't have the music industry clout to veto a decision like this when made by an established producer. Another interesting fact, it was not one but two session guitarists that were brought in to replace Perry and Whitford, which is kind of cool, right? If you're going to replace two guitar players, bring in two guitar players. That way, at least you get that sort of call and response dynamic that Perry and Whitford would often employ in their own work. The guitarists in question were Steve Hunter and Dick Wagner. Not exactly household names, but then again, most session players aren't. Interestingly, their careers were often intertwined, not just on this project, but both played with Alice Cooper, both played with Lou Reed, and additionally, Hunter worked with Peter Gabriel on his own. He played all the guitars on Gabriel's tune Salisbury Hill. Some great acoustic work there. Meanwhile, for his part, Wagner played extensively on Kiss's Destroyer album. So the big question is, why did Douglas feel this move was necessary? Well, he has stated that at this point in their musical development, Perry and Whitford certainly had the emotion and gut feel element of their playing down, but they just didn't yet have the musical precision to nail what was necessary in a timely manner. And time was of the essence. They were under pressure to finish the recording and begin the mixing process the very next day. And guess what? Hunter and Wagner happened to be already recording next door in the record plant studio, and the rest was history. I'm seeing conflicting information on this, but as far as I can tell, Steve Hunter plays the opening guitar solo. We heard a little piece of that in the intro. It's cool, nothing extraordinary. It's funny, listening back to it, I find it hard to believe that Perry and or Whitford couldn't have come up with something along those lines, but hey, I wasn't there. It's just E minor pentatonic, very bluesy. I love that sort of train sound in the beginning. Now, the second solo is played by Dick Wagner. Now, I don't know if you guys all remember how this recording plays out. In the middle, there's a breakdown. We hear some cool drumming from Joey Kramer, and the band reemerges. But now it sounds as if it's a live performance. For the longest time, I thought it was. I thought they had just sort of melded two performances, studio and live, together. It turns out it was all studio. Jack Douglas dubbed on some crowd noise to make it sound like the second half was live. And that's where we get Wagner's solo. Let's hear a little bit of that. Much in the same vein as the first solo, very cool stuff. Now, one final note on this one. In spite of the initial disappointment of not being allowed to play on this, Joe Perry later admitted that observing a couple of studio veterans going about their business during this session proved to be a very valuable guitar lesson that led to the improvement of his own playing. So at least there was that silver lining. Great little tune. Anyone out there remember Jay Ferguson? Thunder Island was, of course, his biggest hit. It reached number 9 on the Hot 100 in 1978. And many people are quick to place him in the one-hit wonder category. But he actually had some other successes as well. A tune called Shakedown Cruise hit number 31 in 1979. Not bad. I think anything that cracks the top 40 can be considered a hit. And to that point, Ferguson had previously scored top 40 hits with two acts he was associated with in the late 60s and early 70s. One of those bands was Spirit, and the other was called JoJo Gunn. And the songs in question appeared in 1968 and 1972, respectively. But of course, Thunder Island will always be the song he is most known for. And I think a huge part of the song's appeal is some killer slide guitar playing from Joe Walsh. You know, I never knew this was Joe Walsh until very recently, but now that I'm aware of it, it's one of those where I look back and think to myself, of course that's Joe Walsh. It just screams Joe Walsh when you hear these lines. You know, there are certain eras of pop music where a particular artist just seems to dominate for whatever reason. Maybe the greatest example is Phil Collins in the early 80s. We all know, those of us who were there was that period where it seemed every other song on the radio was Phil Collins' voice, whether it was Genesis, his solo work, or some collaboration with another artist. I could also point to Michael McDonald in the 70s and into the early 80s, whether it was his stuff with the Doobie Brothers, Steely Dan, Christopher Cross, or a number of other artists. And I think you could almost include Joe Walsh's distinctive slide guitar playing into that category. If you think about it, it was so ubiquitous throughout the 70s and again into the 80s. Solo stuff like Rocky Mountain Way, of course, the Eagles tunes, Life in the Fast Lane, The Long Run, or guest spots for artists such as Jay Ferguson. Walsh was recruited to play on Thunder Island by Bill Szymczyk, who produced the song, and of course is also known for his extensive work with the Eagles, so a natural connection there. Thunder Island was recorded at the same Miami studio that hosted many of the Hotel California sessions. And by the way, maybe it's just me, but the idea that even parts of Hotel California were recorded in Miami rather than California, particularly LA, just seems so wrong to me. I just want to try and put that image out of my mind. That is such a quintessentially LA in the mid-1970s record. I can't imagine any part of it being created anywhere else. All right, so I think we'll cut this one here. Hope you guys enjoyed it as usual. Thanks for hanging out to the end. Got to do the usual reminders: like, subscribe, share with your friends, consider a financial contribution. Go to the description of the video to see the ways you can do that. And we will see you soon.